Get all the nervous energy out.
Dan and Slick, a podcast, episode 22.
I think we should clap again. That was a weak clap.
You're right, that was a weak clap. Here we go.
There
Dan
we go.
podcast, episode 22. I live in a new place. Someone lives above me. How are we doing? Well,
I'm doing well.
good to hear, man. Good to hear. You gotta help me on this one. I think you're like, where am I wrong? Where am I wrong? So you're in the education business. Incredibly important to have great teachers like yourself. Shout out teachers. We focus a lot in education around me, reading for myself, presenting. But there isn't a lot about listening. There's a lot about ability to write, do math for myself, create a good job for myself. But how do we create a better incentive to help folks listen? Because that's the skill that needs to be perpetuated going into the workplace. Where am I wrong on this?
Yeah, so I think, so the one place where I think you might be wrong is like that's such a meta skill that you shouldn't like codify it and then make it a class separate from other skills. Like you don't want to silo that knowledge. But I think you do. I think the right twist on your idea is like, okay, this should be something that's incorporated into classrooms explicitly. So like every class should have like some sort of collaborative process and where you're talking about these skills, these interpersonal skills, because
right.
I think that's kind of what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot in early education around interpersonal skills, but I feel like just a dedicated like listening, like hey, the incentive isn't for you to be the center of attention. Is the center? The idea is like for you to give others like a platform to be the center of attention. I know it's tougher for like lesser developed brains, but I think it's a skill that would go a long way, getting folks exposed to that really early in the education process.
Yeah, just like that skill of listening. I think it's interesting how like a lot of things are picked up just very naturally if you have the structure for it. So like a Socratic seminar sort of class style, where it's like, hey, like this is what it's set up for, the physical environment set up for it, and like a circle where it's equal sharing. And yeah, so I think there's a lot of cool things you can do with the listening skill. But I think you're right. Like the how do you get people to naturally want to listen more?
Yeah.
Like I'm definitely guilty of just like not being fully present when someone's talking, and I think it's also because like our brains are being taught to just like tune most things out because it's just nonsense, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's only so much the attention. There's like a very little, small amount of things you can really pay attention to, and really sink your teeth into. Yeah, I mean, I would just say going into professional life, listening is so important, way more than other reading, writing, what have you. Listening.
No, I don't know about that. Okay, anyway. Okay, so logical fallacy here. So here's just a throwaway phrase. I'm gonna give you two examples actually. First one,
okay, here we go.
If you're open to it, love will find you. And then second one, if you wage war against Mother Nature will win. So what's the logical fallacy in those two statements? And don't think of it extracted from what they're actually saying. So it's not about love and nature, but it's about how I made that argument. This is a really tough one, by the way.
Well, I think that. Well, I think it's an argument of a lack of information. There's just not a lot of context there. It's like tough to argue against either of them because like you're you're not exactly wrong. You can find love in a lot of different ways, I suppose. And Mother Nature, you can't really lose, even if she.
Yeah, no, that's exactly. It's something else. But you're right. What you're hitting upon there is correct. So it's like, what does it mean to be open to love? Like love is an abstract idea, and it's not something you can physically be open to, and that's the fallacy. It's similar to the map as the territory. That's another example in this category where like you shouldn't treat the map as the actual terrain. It's just an abstraction of it to understand it better. And so this is called reification, which is like a Latin root word meaning basically to thingify it, to make it into a thing. Like the in media res.
So it's kind of like the opposite of abstraction. Like abstraction is to make something like that.
Yeah, it's bringing an abstraction to a concrete reality where it doesn't make sense.
Oh, interesting. Reification. Yeah. It's actually really productive. I enjoy learning these new words. What would be a good example? I guess you see phrases like that on a day-to-day basis. It's like giving you advice. Oh, you'll find the person. Just open your heart, and your love will find you. Like shit like that.
Yeah. Well, sometimes it's used like not literally and it's just like a rhetorical device. Like I'm gonna take this job by the balls. Like whatever. Like obviously you're not like trying to say like this job has genitalia. You're just you're making a point. It's a rhetorical device. It's exaggeration. But when people use it like, oh, you just need to be open to love, then love will find you. It's like you can't be open to love. Give me more concrete stuff here.
I love it. That's good. Reification for all kids at home. All right, tip of the day. So we're focused big on education today. I guess for whatever reason that was my theme. We need to destigmatize sales. That's my pet project, especially because I work in sales. But if you look at the folks that have great influence, it's politicians, the folks who lead us into the future are the ones that learn to sell. So sell.
Yeah, I think my dad talks about this a lot, where it's just like, any job really when you get down to it is selling something. So like, I think it's just framing the skills of being a salesman. I think what people don't like is just like the kind of grimy, cold call nature. They just like don't connect. It's like that's not my spirit anymore. I don't want to mess with it, kind of thing,
Yeah.
But they can't separate that sort of vision of what being in sales is with the very transferable skill set you get from being a good salesman. So I think maybe you've just got to like remarket these. You've got to sell sales better, man.
Right. It's interesting that like so many people work in sales. It's like one of the basically the proportion of jobs across the U.S. and there's like a fraction of actual colleges and universities have sales degrees. It's just for whatever reason it's kind of like foo-foo. It's like it's not as. But then the folks that are willing to do the dirty work and like kind of deal with the awkwardness can be incredibly successful.
But I feel like sales is almost like more kind of like apprenticeship sort of. It's almost like a craft you have to learn on. Like it's very hard to learn from a book much about. So like you can read about it, but it's it's like okay.
You gotta get your hands dirty.
You gotta be in front of a human and try to sell them something. Like that's where you're gonna and just fall on your face a few times.
Right? Yeah. But with technology now, it's so helpful to be. I think before, if you think about what like a sales meeting looked like in the 80s or 90s, you're like an hour in front of someone. You gotta like push them hard. You gotta like really boiler room them because if you don't get them in that hour, then like
never see them again.
What are you gonna send them a letter like a month later? Like hey, like
that's very true.
But now it's like in front of them. You can send videos. You can email, what have you, call them. It's a lot easier. So
constant access.
Exactly.
It's definitely a double-edged kind of thing. Okay, Dan. So magic wand here. You get to move the highest average pay, and the highest prestige onto a new industry. And this could be worldwide or just in the United States of America where we reside, but that's up to you.
Yeah, that's a good one. Because the first thing that popped in my brain was teachers. I know that, I think we touched on that before on another episode, talking about the creating incentive to get more folks into the education space. I think I'll go with teachers. Yeah, that'd be pretty sweet to just get like, the best. Not to say that there aren't bright minds now. Some folks just have incredible passion for teaching the youth, man. But that's like the most important job for like a given society. Like you need folks that have strong influence over who's coming up. That's the way to create scale. So my mom was also a teacher for 30 years.
Here's something I thought So when I first thought of this question, I was like, that's where I went first, and then I was like,
Yeah.
well, and then I thought about something Andrew Yang had said about saying like, well, like really the hardest work that doesn't get included in the economy at all is like the work that parents do. So it's like, how do you, how do you make being a good parent high prestige and high
Right.
income?
Need to create that. That's a good create the incentive. Yeah, it is.
Because like the payoffs of just like creating another good human, like no, that's not going to be measured on any GDP really. It's really hard to, but like long term, that's like huge, right? That's,
So true.
the impact of that could be, I mean, so I was kind of like, okay, is this where like the failings of just basic economics kind of kind of runs into a wall here? It's like, okay, private personal life, kind of like, okay, we can't like quantify this private life thing. We
Right.
can kind of like look from afar at the effects and be like, okay, let's hope they do that.
I know, yeah. So it's an interesting incentive because or disincentive because we're so incentivized by quantitative stuff. I sold $500,000 and X product. Now I get 10% of that, whatever. That's like my value instead of creating it for the soft stuff. Oh, no. But dude, that's so interesting. Yeah, yours was better than mine. But I think we're in the same ballpark around the parenting and teachers.
Definitely.
Basically just influencing
I
the
think-
folks coming up. It's like such a
I think we just have to
Interesting
bracket
challenge.
that discussion as like existing industries. What would be the best way to maximize the existing, and then, okay, given the existing limits, what would be a new and interesting way to envision, just
Yeah.
the way we think about what jobs really are.
right. I like that. Yeah, I think it would be it's a little bit of apples to oranges, but yeah, probably those two buckets. Yeah, if it was the first bucket, yeah, I think teachers would probably be the best one. But second bucket is who knows, man? Could be anything.